I think there's a universal truth that we don't talk about enough, and that is that if you ever ask of anyone, could a certain politician or political party be any more stupid in its decision making, you are essentially guaranteeing by the laws of the universe that that candidate or that party will prove to you, yes, yes, I absolutely can be stupider. I'm convinced that I picked the ideal time to start shifting the focus of this channel specifically to Australian politics, because the last 3 weeks of Ozpol have consistently been this moment of thinking things cannot get more off the rails and more dramatic. And every single day we have made that assumption, we have been proven wrong. And that includes today. One thing that's become apparent today about the National Liberal Party split is that it seems that the decision was not unanimous on the part of the Nationals, that there was quite a bit of dissent. And the two leading figures that seem to be out there putting on a show and trying to say that this was not a unanimous decision and that there are critics in the Nationals of what has happened are Michael McCormack and Barnaby Joyce, two former leaders of the National Party and two former deputy prime ministers. Now, these two share a fairly interesting dynamic. Barnaby was, of course, leader of the Nationals and then was enveloped in scandal, mainly around an affair and an illegitimate child that he had with somebody that he worked for. We'll get into that on another day. So he resigned, McCormack took over the National Party, but then when Barnaby a couple of years later decided that enough time had passed, he challenged McCormack and took over leadership of the National Party from him. So these two traditionally do not get along that well and are political rivals within the National Party, but they seem to be on the same page at the moment, and that is that David Littleproud has not handled this post-election chaos well at all, and if anything, he has seriously damaged the reputation of the National Party. Now, David Littleproud and the National Party in general have been trying to make this pitch that the 2025 election was not bad for them, it was just bad for the Liberals. But McCormack seems to have gone against that and has said that the election was a thrashing, and talking to the media in a very open way, kind of undermining this appearance of confidence that Littleproud wants the party to have at the moment. McCormack also a very vocal critic of how Littleproud has handled these coalition negotiations and described what David has been doing as just really messy. And it got a little bit odd today because somebody asked him if Littleproud still had his support, and McCormack said that that would be a decision for the party room, and then he used the term "I'm ambitious for him," referring to Littleproud and his continued leadership, which very interestingly, if you follow Australian politics much, you did in the late 2010s, you will remember that "I'm ambitious for him" is what Scott Morrison said about Malcolm Turnbull. So very interesting coded language there from McCormack. Maybe, I'm inferring from that use of phrase. Now, Barnaby Joyce is a man who will never be forgotten in Australian political history. He openly encouraged and endorsed Matt Canavan in his challenge of David Littleproud's leadership not too long ago, just earlier this month, when they had a leadership spill in the Nats, as they do after every election. So he is very open in his criticism of Littleproud as well. And it seems that Barnaby, working with McCormack, has been a big part of the backbench negotiations that have been taking place between Liberals and Nationals to try and get the coalition back together. So the situation in the Nats is you have Littleproud, the leader, very confidently walking away from the coalition agreement. But at the same time, the previous two leaders of the Nationals, both sitting on the backbench, are doing everything they can to try and keep things together behind closed doors. And it seems that these two have really developed their bond over the last couple of chaotic weeks, because we now have information from the ABC talking to senior national sources that Barnaby Joyce is going around behind closed doors and is actively campaigning for McCormack to become the new leader of the National Party and replace Littleproud. So to add to all the chaos of what is happening at the moment in Australian politics, particularly on the right side of Australian politics, we now have two former leaders of the National Party seemingly conspiring to try and orchestrate another leadership spill to overthrow the leader, despite the fact they just had a leadership spill. But I think if we look at history, there is quite a concerning trend for leadership spills and movements like this. You guys probably remember back on the other side of the coalition in 2018, when Malcolm Turnbull beat Peter Dutton's challenge of his leadership, but then 3 days later, Malcolm Turnbull was gone in another leadership spill motion. So there is quite a bit of precedence, and I'm not even going to get into the Rudd years, but there is precedence here for, normally if there is a well put together challenge to somebody's leadership in a political party, it won't just stop at one leadership challenge. And I would say that the main reason that Barnaby himself isn't running is, well, first of all, in 2022, he lost the leadership election to David Littleproud in the first place. And secondly, Barnaby, unfortunately, has been diagnosed with prostate cancer. And as far as I understand from the news that we've read, his surgeries have been going very well and he caught it early, which I think we should all be thankful for. Prostate cancer is a monster to deal with, but he's probably not in the best state of health to try and launch his own leadership ambitions at the moment and taking a step back. So it's a very Shakespearean sort of setup that it's to the point of it being almost ridiculous, where you have two long-term political rivals putting their differences aside, one of them being incredibly ill and deciding to support the other so they can overthrow their mutual enemy. I still can't believe this is what Australian politics has come to.